All right, all right. Here we are again. Welcome back with the aftermath of the college football conference championship weekend. Here we are. We're waiting just hours away for the um, announcement to who makes it into the college football playoff. Um, like many of you, as a college football fan, we pretty much know who are the main players who are going to be in. It's just who is going to get that last bid in. And obviously, that generally is going to come down to Alabama, SMU in particular, and possibly Miami if you want to throw them in there. And then you want to throw in the other teams, like such as South Carolina or even Ole Miss, which doesn't appear likely that either one of those teams will be getting in. But just for the fodder of conversation, we can do that. But what a weekend. What a games yesterday, folks. Saturday, championship Saturday. We couldn't ask for a better collection of good games, that we could have watched heading into Saturday's weekend. And this is what we're can say is the new era to this college football um, state of college football going forward, because the intensity of these games are going to only increasing, get more better. And that's what we want as college football fans. We want to have games that really test the metal and are competitive and go down to the wire. Close competitive games. Uh, it raises the stakes up each and every weekend for all these teams. And and so we're going to see how this all plays out. We're likely to see some of these teams are going to be perennial participants in this tournament, this playoff, and while others are going to switch chairs, year to year. Certainly, we're going to see that, and this is sort of really going to ramp up um, the level to which college football now, that people having a taste of it, are going to, it's going to draw fans. Certainly, it's going to draw, people into the sport. But for the hardcore traditional football, college football fans, we love it. Now, we know that it has its imperfections, and I've said that in previous videos since the beginning of the year. Okay, since the beginning of the end of the last football season, prior to that even, but on record in video in one of these video casts, this has been. Um, I've been saying this. I've been saying first and foremost that by configuring, manipulating the fact that you're going to guarantee the fourth first slots for conference champions is an injustice in and of itself, because it puts teams such as a Clemson potentially, we ain't saying it for sure, but potentially in the top four position, which we're looking at. We say, well, they're not necessarily one of the top four teams, and they're three losses, and so you get a team in there with three losses. That was something that we haven't seen, and they're the first team to be earned a right in the playoff era with three losses, and so forth. And then I knew that teams would be jockeying um, in that middle bunch, particularly with the number 5 seed. I knew that that was going to be a key uh, seeding that could be an easier pathway for teams to go advance. And what have we heard over the last couple of weeks now with all the talking heads and pundits out there? Saying the very same thing, that something that I have said, which I didn't hear leading up to the season. Okay, I was saying this in all the off season. Um, now people are waking up to the fact that what that looks like. So I've been saying this, and with regard to this stuff, long ago. Um, Go back and watch some of my videos, and you will hear me mention this stuff. Now, here we are. Okay, again, the day after the conference champions, waiting still in a few hours' time what the plan of playoffs is going to look out. What is the rest of the bowl? Because there are other bowls out there. What are those matchups are going to look like as well too? And so let me just kind of do a brief recap on the games, and let me just talk about what 12 that I see being in the playoff, and then which four do I think will be earning the first round buys and so forth. So, and then that'll be a wrap, and then we'll come back with another video, sort of looking at what does the committee say as far as these games go, and all the good stuff. So now let's start off with the way the schedule kind of went. Let's go with Arizona State and Iowa State. And Arizona State, for the first half of the first quarter, it was a really good game, kind of going back and forth a bit. And then Arizona State just got settled in, and they just handled business and just, ran away with that game for the most part, dominating the game against Iowa State. A very good competitive Iowa State team. They came in with only 2 losses. So you got to tip your hat to them for that. But out of all the games, Arizona State was the most impressive in its matchup in handling his business. Okay. By far. Okay. So they were the first team to punch their ticket to the automatic conference qualifier. And again, kudos to them for doing such. And everything, going into that game, I had picked Arizona State to win that game. And they've been on a roll. They've been playing really good football. They were a team that was picked last in the preseason in their conference in the Big 12. And what do you know? So they're going to have to watch out, because that coach might be in high demand for some higher places soon enough. Arizona State fans out there, you best try to hang on to this guy. Probably not, because again, if a team out of one of these bigger conferences like the Big Ten or SEC come calling, I'm sure he's going to have a look. Okay. So anyhow, so we got kicked off with the Arizona State Iowa State game. Again, Arizona State handled business, and pretty much like I said, punched their ticket in, and then they're good to go. Next up, we had Georgia, Texas, right? And so now you have a rematch of a previously regular season conference game where Georgia went into Texas and just dominated them from beginning to end. And so people wasn't sure what we are going to get this second game around. Could it be a redo of what we saw previously? Could it be a really tight game? Could Texas really kind of come in and take advantage of a kind of enigma Georgia team? What were we going to get out of this? Well, we got an amazing game, a game that both teams at times could have just, like as good games are, where a team has an opportunity to kind of stretch a lead and can take control of a game and that type of thing, and they just don't do it. They don't capitalize on the opportunities. And that's what we can say in a tale of two halves in this game. The first half being Texas, where they had opportunities. They could have had been up probably 17-3 or something like that, or 6, or 20-6, or even more than that. They had opportunities that just they could take advantage of. There were 2 opportunities there, blundering offsides and all that stuff, where they had interceptions that did not happen, and so forth. And then offensively, missing field goals and what have you. And so they went in. Got this going on here. Sorry about that. We keep up. So here we are. Then the second half, as we saw, with Georgia coming out with their backup quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. And no one who don't follow Georgia wouldn't have known who this kid was. And he's a genuinely good guy. If you watch an interview with him and you see his demeanor, this kid is just a true country boy, Southern Georgian, and good-hearted person. When you look at just you just can feel it, his energy of how good-natured he is. And so I say that respectfully. Um, why his teammates love him so, because of his personality and everything. And so, but it's like he turns that switch on. He get in the game, it's like he's a different person. He's like, and so he came out and was real effective, leading Georgia to take the lead in the game. And there you have it. It was made a difference. When Carson Beck went out, people didn't know what to expect from Georgia at that point. Thought it might have been over, even because, again, when the backup comes in, it go two, three different ways, generally, right? And so, fortunate for Georgia, that was like a recipe of success for them. From that point on, they had a spark. They had some juice in them. Everybody seemed to level up their play and everything. So outstanding on the part of Georgia. So that game went into the overtime, as you know, and Georgia won in their possession of the overtime, having won the coin flip, which was a great advantage for them. And Texas, as you saw, just could not do it. Now, I'm one of those, like many of you, certainly several of you out there, who aren't as sold on Quinn Ewers as the guy who you really believe can take a team to the national championship. I mean, I've been saying this all season watching him. I believe that Arch Manning is the better of the two quarterbacks, and Arch Manning, when he was in there playing, not so much this game, I'm talking about like previously on the regular season, he really was effective. He's got that dual threat. He can run, he can throw. He his balls are just his decision making. Of course, because he's a Manning, right? What would you expect? Less of that. He's a Manning pedigree kid. So, but Quinn Ewers hurt that team big time. Two terrible interceptions. Um, so the second, especially that second one. Now, the first one, you can kind of say, okay, it was a batted ball, contested ball, and what have you. But the second one was just ridiculous. And then the throws that he had in overtime and stuff, and just decision making there cost Texas. So Texas only going to go far as Quinn Ewers and so forth, and they don't want to see Georgia again. Georgia has their number. Georgia uh, is beating Texas like Alabama beats at Georgia. It's like it's like you got this ping pong, and Georgia can beat Texas, but Georgia can't beat Alabama consistently. Now they beat them, you know, uh, what one time, in the last what 5 rounds that they played each other or something like that. So, but Georgia is just something they got to get over the hump to beat Alabama more on a consistent basis. Okay, one out of every 4 times isn't much to talk about, um, and so forth. But yes, so in these recent matches between Texas and Georgia, and now that Texas is a SEC full-fledged SEC member, uh, they 0 for 2 against Georgia. Okay, at this point, starting their SEC tenure. Okay, so here we go. Now, so that was a thriller of a game. Like I said, that Georgia pulled out, as you all know, in overtime with the ETN run up the middle, and there you go. Now we go over to the Clemson game because that ended before the Oregon Penn State game. So I'll go to Clemson SMU first in that one. And so that one started out, like game busters for Clemson. It was looked like it's going to be a blowout, and everybody's going to be talking about how overrated SMU was, and they probably shouldn't deserve to get that spot. There was a lot of controversy over this, and this is one of the talking points that we're going to really get into, is the fact that SMU showed some mettle and came back to tie that game in the last seconds of the fourth quarter. And unfortunately, though, the unfortunate part, Clemson pulled it out with a thriller of a 56-yard field goal to walk off that game victorious ACC champions once again. Um, Almost perennial ACC champions, as you can say, with Clemson over there, because that conference, it doesn't get the respect that these other ones do, and so. But they're going to be, a competitive conference for sure. I mean, with Miami there, and certainly SMU now in this conference in their first year making it to the conference title game, they're going to have much to say. And then, of course, Clemson, and then who knows what's going to be of the rest of the bunch, Florida State, Pittsburgh, and the rest of them. We don't know, um, how those programs are middle of the road teams and so forth. And, perhaps every 5, 6, 7 years, you might get one of them in the mix for the playoff and all that other stuff. But so this was a great game. Indy, the most of it, it was Clemson dominating. But Clemson does what Clemson does in terms of what we have seen of Clemson. So playing great, like a top 10, top 5 team on one hand, and then the other hand looking like you don't know what, like an average team, and so forth. Their vulnerabilities, particularly with a running dual threat quarterback, which they struggle with now back to back weeks, and so forth. So that's a key clog on Clemson, and so forth. So they pulled that game out fantastically, mind you, with the thrilling walk-off field goal. So they punched their ticket as well too, and it's a matter of where do they land, which I'll get to in a minute here. And then, of course, the other finale of the conference games was the Oregon Penn State game. The way Oregon was playing, starting out, you know, um, one can say that they were totally in control to win that game. Even the fact that Penn State fought back in the game, but they never had the wherewithal to really take advantage to get ahead. I think you can say that from the beginning. It was, to me, it set the tone. When Oregon went down and scored their touchdown, then Penn State went down, but they couldn't capitalize to score a touchdown, only selling for a field goal. To me, that was a difference right there. To me, that was the game right there, because had Penn State scored, then they knew they were going to have to match whatever Oregon did. They was going to have to match them score for score, whether it be field goals, whether it be touchdowns. Or if Oregon scored a field goal, Penn State needed a touchdown. Penn State could not win this game on field goals alone to win, period. You know, and that's any team that plays Oregon. You're going to have to score touchdowns to beat Oregon. You can't just think you're going to kick some field goals and win that game, unless, of course, it's tied up and you have a walk off such as Clemson did against SMU. But outside of that, you need to score some touchdowns. You need to limit them from scoring touchdowns to beat Oregon. And so, in watching that game, it seems like every time that Penn State got a score, Oregon scored right back, or they made a key play. And the quarterback, especially that interception, that bad interception where Oregon just scored on the next play, that was a key play. That could have been a play where certainly that quarterback wish he had back. And so these are where games are won and lost a lot of times. Again, as we all know, turnovers, key plays, penalties, and what have you. When you add in all that, the numbers and stuff, those essential plays are key turnarounds, and certainly enough, that was one of them that you can add in there because that they took advantage. Oregon took advantage and scored when they would not have had those points otherwise. When you start going through the analysis and looking at the game and see certain plays to which, okay, if they just went down and had a drive and scored versus them getting a turnover or getting a penalty called and all this other stuff, and what have you. So there you go. But nonetheless, Oregon certainly was the better team, and they certainly pulled it out, despite the gallant effort of Penn State, um, playing like they did. But again, Coach Franklin comes up short, winning top 5 matchup, top 10 matchup with his Penn State team. That's still the narrative out there on Coach Franklin. Despite the fact that, I mean, his teams play competitive. It's not as if they're getting blown out in these games. It's just the fact that they just haven't been able to pull these games out. One of the things that Penn State needs to do as a team to keep up with the likes of Ohio State and Oregon is they're going to have to get faster players, and their skill players, wide receivers, certainly. They need some explosiveness when you look at Penn State in a way, they remind you of like the 1980s, Penn State and that kind of thing. You know, they don't look overall like they have that kind of team speed and electrifying offense uh, that uh, that's going to keep up with the elites. I'm just talking about. Yeah, they can beat the Marylands and the Minnesotas and those schools. But when it comes to the best of the best and the elite teams, there just seems to be a step behind those teams. And that's what I'm saying. So that's what it looks like. Now, let me get to quickly um, my 12 teams, which might look similar to many of your 12 teams that should make this playoff. Obviously, first we got to talk with Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Clemson, Arizona State. The next group, Notre Dame, Indiana, Boise State, Ohio State, Tennessee, and drumroll, SMU. Yes, SMU gets the last bid in over Alabama. Sorry, Alabama. But your 3 losses does not help you. And there's only room for one 3-loss team in this playoff, and that will be Clemson. Certainly. Not to say in future years we might not see 2 3-loss teams in the playoff, but not this year. Um, you know, um, People talk about the fact that Alabama's loss, particularly to Oklahoma, did them in certainly, but that's the truth of the matter. That loss, and the fact that when you compare it to SMU, based upon SMU earning the right playing in their conference title game, to me, that differential outweighs the fact that who um, Alabama beat and so forth. So people can go back and forth over the schedule, strength of schedule, which team did you beat, and top 25 and all this and that and the other. But again, I'm one of those who looks at conference title appearance and what you've done over the games that you have to play. Again, you going to every season, you don't know how good or bad that your opponents are going to be. Same with Indiana's schedule. People boo-hooing about their schedule. Well, they played 2 teams in Washington and Michigan who just a year ago were in the national championship game. Now, is it Indiana's fault that Michigan wasn't the Michigan from last year? Is it Indiana's fault that Washington isn't the team that they were last year? No. And no one knew that. People expected Michigan to make the playoff. People expected Washington at least to be a contender in the Big Ten and so forth. Not necessarily they were picked to win it. They were probably picked like fourth or fifth or somewhere around there, maybe even down lower than that, sixth or seventh even, with the teams they have stacked in that conference. But the point being is that um, you know, those teams, obviously you saw what Michigan did to Ohio State. Obviously seeing what Washington did beating some teams, beating UCLA and beating USC and playing, tough against some other teams there in the Big Ten. Um, so you can play the schedule that you have now, especially if you're in a Power Four conference. Okay, you can't just to miss them off of who they beat and what have you, because rankings change week to week. So to say, oh yeah, we beat this team, we beat this number of top 25 teams is a relative point because that team is only ranked at that point in time when you play them or haven't played them. So when you play them and then they fall out the rankings, they would rank when you played them, but then they fall out the rankings, then people might say, oh, well, you didn't beat no top 25 teams. Well, they was ranked at the time we played them. Then if you play them when they're unranked, and then they become ranked, then people use whatever is good for them. That's how they play it. If the team is ranked at the time that they played them, and then they're not ranked later, then people would say, "Oh, you didn't beat no ranked teams." Well, at the time they played that team, they were ranked, so that would count. And then if they played a team that's at the time they played them unranked, but then that team becomes ranked, okay, then people are going to use that too. So this is the nature of the beast in this thing, when how people again use these data points of rankings, because they change. And what are you talking about? Are we talking about ranking at the time you played them, or are you talking about the ranking at the time that it matters when it comes to, okay, when we're looking at these teams to be in the playoff or not in the playoff, particularly at this final portion? How do you measure that? So forth. What matter first? It should come, well, where they rank at the time you played them, and then you can sort of say, if after that point, a team that has been ranked, and so forth. Bottom line is, did you win your games? And you had opportunities to win your games. If you didn't win your games, oh well. And that's the bottom line key. So in that case, this is why Alabama is not in the playoff. Period. As much as their commissioner Sankey has advocated and tried his best with getting as many SEC teams. There was talk at one point there'll be 5 SEC teams, 6 SEC teams in the playoff. None of that. What do we have? 3: Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee, and 4 from the Big Ten with Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, and Ohio State. There you go. So, and no one was thinking about the ACC. They were an afterthought. It was there. Okay, they get their one bid in there, and that'll be about it. You know. And what is also funny in this whole narrative is the fact that each network, if you like me, you're surfing all the different networks, watching the different games, and hearing the pundits talk about each particular conference and the games and the matchups and those sorts all season long. Now, this is not just what was going on yesterday. This is all season long. Then each of the conference, ACC network, they've been singing the parade of, oh yeah, we deserve 3 teams: Miami, SMU, and Clemson, or whoever win the championship. Right? That's kind of like what we've heard from the ACC, uh, uh, pretty much all season long with them. Big Ten network, 4 teams, 5 teams, perhaps, but certainly 4 teams. And they certainly got their 4 teams in, and they're really pushing back against the SEC narrative that they are the best conference in, the title of that. Uh, So we'll see how that all plays out. But the Big Ten Network, yeah, they're the same thing. They're saying, oh yeah, we got the best four teams, we this and that and the other. We should have our teams in there. And then of course, the SEC network, their narrative is the same thing. All the SEC teams, Alabama should be in, Tennessee should be in, Georgia should be in, Texas should be in, all these teams, and even Ole Miss and South Carolina, certainly South Carolina's case. So you heard these narratives throughout the weeks, and certainly going into championship weekend, everybody's sort of jockeying themselves to get as many teams from their conference in there. But this is what it should be. And the four teams, just to add this and close out with this, the four teams that I believe should get the byes are Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State, which might be shocking for some folks. But you can't just take a Clemson team, even if they did beat at the time, eighth rank SMU team, um, beat them in terms of just catapulting them up to one of the top four slots. I wouldn't go that far. Okay. I wouldn't go that far. I would certainly move Arizona State up, and they would get that one of those byes. People aren't going to like that because they anticipate that and so forth. But here's where we are at. And with that, I'm going to stop because I want to get ready, like many of you, and await what is going to happen with regard to this playoff um, seating and where everybody's playing and who is in and who is out, like you. So we'll tap into that and check in with you on the next one. Thank you so much.